Welcome to our next episode of the Top Innovator Series. My name is Joseph Martens. I'm your host today and the founder of the Tech Executive Club. With us today is Al Basseri. Al is the CTO of Ferret, an AI platform that helps companies and individuals identify risks and opportunities. And before that, Al has held several CTO and tech executive roles in other organizations. Al, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, and thank you so much for giving me our opportunity to chat with you. So it's a pleasure for me also. Thank you.
Look forward to diving into your leadership experience, your leadership journey. Clearly an accomplished journey, Al. I would love to know, when you reflect on that journey and the experiences, what do you think were some of the key factors to your success? What are the ingredients to getting you where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey. And it's been a fun journey, and I always like to put things in historical context, especially comparing different industries. I'll just vividly quote one of my favorite musicians, Miles Davis, right? So if you look at Miles Davis' success, it wasn't that he wasn't a great musician. That's not it. He always had an ability to surround himself with great musicians. And what made Miles Davis such an innovator is that he didn't stay with the same exact format or segments within his field, right? So he expanded. So he went from, different genres of jazz and expanded even beyond jazz. And that's actually a great life lesson, right? Which is, often when I started my career, it's very important to have mentors. To become a great leader, you really have to have great leaders as mentors. But the important thing also, it's also important to realize that you have to cover it at both ends, which is you don't necessarily need to have someone who has extensive experience to be your mentor. You need some of that, but you also need people who are younger than you and thinking, different perceptions. So I have mentors that are frankly teens and 20s, right? And that's very important because we don't get, we sometimes, and I'll talk about this all the time because I hear it all the time, right? I'm sure your audience hears it all the time. You hear music and you go, oh, you know what? This is not as good as what used to be when I was growing up. The music now is all auto-tuned, or they'll see, they'll talk about technology, developers. Oh, this is too easy. It's quick for us based on our own perception to think what we experience is so much harder and better and mature than anything now, right? So it is important when you think about having mentors in your career as a leader that you cover the wide spectrum, right? So you have to have people who haven't done this before you, and you also have to have mentors who are much younger than you, who have brand new experience, who are in the front line, because there's a lot to be learned from that. And I think that's what I've consciously trying to do. And we do that in personal life, by the way, all the time, right? You go to a great restaurant, the chef could be 20 something, and you go, wow, that's probably one of the best meals I ever had. And you envy the chef, you want to follow it. And I'm not just sitting there asking, well, I'm not going to follow this chef because he hasn't been cooking or she hasn't been cooking for 20 years. Yeah. So it's very important in technology leadership. You have the same thought process in your decision making.
Interesting thought, right? The younger mentors. And I haven't come across that at all yet. I love that thought. Tell me how you select mentors then. So I get it. The chef, highly established, and we get the sense either from some reviews or from the stars on the restaurant and our own food experience, of course. But how do you get intentional about selecting these mentors?
I appreciate young mentors that he or she have experienced failures and bounce back quickly. And they're very innovative and creative, right? I also have, there's this idea in terms of learning that I talk about engaging all your senses in learning, right? Expanding your perception. So we have a tendency to kind of put ourselves, creating this echo chamber, right? Surrounding yourself with people who think like you, and they go, hey, I'm right because everybody else also agrees with me.
Much easier.
Absolutely. So it is very important when you look at even young mentors that have that same kind of philosophy, right? that using all senses, not just eyes and ears, but smell and taste. And that's a metaphor I'm using. That means they're open to new ideas, right?
Okay.
And that's very important. And you pick that up. I picked that up from the older mentors in my career, but I also see that. And when I do see that, I get excited, right? And doesn't have to be always in the same segment in technology. So I do, having attended a 12-year-old, I see their buying habits. I see like their viewing habits, right? Like, take a segment of technology and the whole influencer ecosystem, right? The 10 and 12-year-old have very little to zero interest on Netflix, Disney, traditional streaming video, traditional network TV. It's all about TikTok, YouTube, and understanding the ecosystem. Who are the leaders in that space, right? And it tends to be very, generationally younger, right? So understanding and then also understanding the ecosystem, completely out of my comfort zone, but it forces me to learn. It forces me to look at those young leaders and go, there's lessons to be learned for me, right? So that's a philosophy I have.
I get it. Yeah. Talk to me about some of the lessons you've learned from that. So tell me some of the advice your mentors have given you. And for the younger ones, right, the way you described it, it sounds like it's less advice, it's more you observing it and drawing your own lessons from it. But who knows, maybe the 10, 12, 15-year-old also gave you advice that you thought, that's insightful. I better pay attention to that. So talk about the advice that you've gotten.
Yeah, the ability to read the different audience, to be in tune with, because the thing is, especially a young mentor, they haven't been around long enough to create false perceptions yet, and you see that in yourself. So which means, like, if you done certain things certain way, again, I'll use an analogy. Take a typical family, right?
Okay.
If you walk in a typical family's house, even ours, there's probably about 24 meals that we cook over and over again, right? So we develop an arsenal, right, of meals, and you think you're really creative, but you're kind of eating the same. Chances are, if you pick a random night, come over to my house, we'll probably cook one of those 24 meals, right?
Yep.
What's nice about a young mentor, they haven't developed all that 24 yet, right? So they're still experimenting. They're still trying to figure out the target audience. And there's things to be learned as a leader, right? I go, wow, this is cool, right? And perfect example of that, if you take very established market leaders, right? Take a company just like Google, right? They have all the money in the world. In matter of fact, they have probably the strictest framework to hire the brilliant people out there, right? Like, it's so difficult to get a job at Google as a developer or a technologist, right? But yet, let's take the latest news, last 24 hours or 40 hours, Google announced they're acquiring a company called Wiz for $32 billion. A company that was zero in revenue 5 years, that gone to $1 billion. And you can make the argument that why couldn't Google innovate and create something with all the smart people they have, with all the resources they have? Because it's the same kind of very narrow framework that you don't necessarily go here and there, where for large technology companies, even SMBs, you get to kind of a stale mode where your thinking process, it's just like those meals. You're going off the same 24 meals, right? So it's not because of lack of smart people. It's not a lack of investment and money. It's just your mentors and your thinking process becomes stale, and you don't get out of your comfort zone. You're not using all your senses. And that essentially what happens to many large companies, not just Google. So usually when you're seeing innovation in these larger companies is M&A, right? They have to go and acquire smaller companies, younger companies, or people who think exactly like that. So you could take that framework as a small leader and go, look, with Google, with all the money they have, with everything they have, they still have to go and spend $32 billion. What makes me think that as a leader, I should have that same exact framework? No, then I should chase. I can't go do an M&A, but I could certainly meet those young companies, go to San Francisco locally. I go to San Francisco, meet young executives, kids right out of college, and learn from them. Don't sit there and brag about, oh, what I've accomplished in 20 years. Just keep it quiet and listen and learn.
This is a great analogy from M&A and the reason why companies do it to break innovation barriers, right? To applying that to yourself. I love it.
Absolutely.
And that's where
that's the way you learn.
Mm-hmm. I get it. That sounds neat. Okay, so that's about your past experience, or a little bit about the past journey and the lessons learned. I'd love to take a look at the current situation, Al, for a moment. And I mean, you seem to be super aware of where you are, what brought you where you are. What do you think are some of the things when you look at today where you feel like I can level up here? So clearly accomplished in many areas, but maybe there are some things where you feel like I could really still grow in that area. I haven't quite cracked the nut there yet, or I can achieve a higher level of mastery in something. What is something like that, Al, where you feel I could pay attention to that?
Absolutely. I mean, I constantly force myself to get out of my comfort zone. And if you look at my career, that's exactly what I've done. I've never stayed in a comfort zone, and I can consistently do that. And then number two, it's a playbook out of Miles Davis. Out of nowhere, he goes and finds John Coltrane and goes, look, that's it. And then or he moves on to the next genre, right? So it is very important that, like, when you talk about expanding your perception, engaging all your senses, that you surround yourself with people that have the same kind of mentality. That's not easy to do, by the way, but it is important that you surround yourself and have mentors, as I mentioned before, and the people you try to bring to your team or work with kind of think the same way, not same way as your perception, but they're using all their senses, right? Mm-hmm. And that's sometimes it's hard, right? People always say, oh, no one likes change. It's not about the change. It's about getting out of your comfort zone, right? And it's, like I said, it's guilty as charged. You come over my house, there's a good chance there is 24 meals we go through, right? Yep. And then sometimes, I sit there and go, oh, what are we going to eat tonight, right? Well, wait, let's just go. I'll throw in the towel. Let's order takeout, right? Because you kind of hit your limit. So you got to keep that mentality, which is very important. It cannot be just restricted to work. You have to think like that 24 hours a day, even your personal life, right? So going back to what I said, I force myself sometimes to actually listen to my kids to tell me about the trends, and I'm just like a fly on the wall. I'm not sitting there going, oh, Dad knows best. I don't sit there and go, oh, the music you listen to is not as good as what I grew up with. No, it's just, you got to listen. You got to, even if you don't appreciate it. So that applies to a lot of technology. Like, a couple of years ago when we were talking about blockchain and the financial market, right? There was a lot of pushback, but there's things to be learned from that. The idea of trust, the idea of consensus, all of those things are very important. But, the takeaway is make sure that you surround yourself with people that are using all the senses also, that they don't have these perceptions that come in. And it's not easy to do. I'm not saying, hey, that's, it's a winning formula. And that's why those kind of great stories, especially in the historical Silicon Valley story, there's been very few companies that would really like that. I mean, you got to go back to the 70s, the Xerox Labs. In the 90s, you had Netscape, the glory days of Apple. The glory days of Apple, the glory days of Sun Microsystems. You could make the arguments that OpenAI, at least the initial phase has been kind of like that. It's almost like, I think about it like, if you go back a couple thousand years, the Library of Alexandria, right? All that, everything, the most innovation, all the great books were coming there. Once in a while, stars line up in Silicon Valley or in other places now where you have that beautiful story, where you get people who think like that. The unfortunate part of it, it won't last, because once the companies get to a certain size, it happens with, just like what I described with Google. You have to go through an M&A to get that creativity back.
Yeah, but that's a mechanism to break through and maybe get some of that back in some part of the company, in the acquired part of the company in that case.
That's correct.
Maybe that's a way of doing it. So you said a few times, look for people who use all the senses. I find that intriguing. I find that really intriguing. Talk to me more about the value of, and I'm struggling to see the professional application of that, right? So I get it in terms of life expansion, in terms of enriching your life. Talk to me about the impact of exposing myself more to touch or to smell and its application in leadership. Build a bridge for me there.
Yeah, so it is important when you actually bringing people in your team that you're bringing them from a different background, not background from a geography point of view,
yep.
but the background in terms of what they accomplished or what they think. So that means I'm not going to hire, I don't want to just hire people that fit certain framework. Sometimes actually opposite. And our first reaction as a leader is like, oh, the chemistry is not going to be there. There's
yep.
going to be conflict. That's your first reaction, right? It's no, we have a certain framework. And look, historically, I've gotten pushbacks from HR because it didn't fit the mold. But that's how you have to think, right? I like to say, well, let's just hire a whole bunch of people out of Caltech, MIT, and Cal. No, you have to.
Doesn't work.
You have to. Doesn't work that way. It doesn't. If you truly are trying to promote that, it doesn't work, right? It's look at the magic. I'll use another company. The magical days of Pixar before they got acquired, right? I mean, Steve Jobs did a great job. It was that you had the very artistic kind of the Burning Man kind of a crowd coming in, aligning with the techies, but it was kind of it was very kind of innovative, right? And it's you could see when things line up and work perfectly like that. So you have to apply that obviously in a much smaller scale, in a way you not only you hire people, but also in terms of your channel strategy, your partnerships, right? I've seen that in technology companies. People try to go and get the same type of channel partner, or same type of they only focus on these type of accounts. Well, then that limits you. Then that limited. And I know it's not always easy. It's out of our comfort zone to do it. Yep. But like I said, you have to apply that across the organization if you want to have. I mean, that's part of the equation. There's still other things that have to line up. You still have to have a product that people want. There's a lot of complexity. Just having those people is a third of the equation, but then your timing, luck, product delivery, all those things are a factor too. But that's what I try to do. Yep. Expect, one of my very good friends always says, look, if you're batting 300 in the baseball terms, you're a Hall of Famer. So it doesn't mean that every time this is a winning formula, but it's the beauty of it's the beauty of startups and young teams. It's a collection of assumptions, right? Yep. It's a collection of assumptions, and sooner you say, all right, you know what, that tune doesn't work. Let's change it up. Let's get back on the piano. Let's move on, right?
I really like the music comparisons, the music references. I really enjoy that. Let me ask you a different question, and maybe that's the final one for our conversation. I would love to know something that you've come to realize in your leadership journey that was an aha moment for you, and you get the sense that not everyone had that aha moment. So something that you're seeing, something that you've discovered, but not everyone has it, and it might be worth sharing that.
It's amazing to me always when you step back how natural leaders in your group rise to the occasion. It is. You have great leaders in your group that sometimes when you step back, they come up, and it's amazing. It's almost like, even when there's a forest fire, a year later you see new growth, and it comes a lot stronger. So to me, is when you have the right environment, and you bring that kind of a culture up, natural leaders just come up out of your organization. And to that point, I can't tell you how many people in my career that used to work for me are surpass my expectation, that I look up to them, that I think the roles are reversed. I look at them, I go, wow, can't believe that guy worked for me. I should have worked for him, right? or that gal. that gal, I'm like, oh my God, that's like, what was I doing managing that person, right?
Yeah.
So
it was one of the younger mentors, maybe. Maybe it was one of the younger mentors, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
Yeah. Very nice. Cool. So thank you so much for being with us, Al. What I really, really enjoyed, that's something that was really unique to this conversation, the breadth of topics that you pulled in, like the cooking, the music, all the senses. I love it. And there is ways for everyone to get uncomfortable and to learn something there, because that's really what it means. Yeah. So thank you for being with us. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. For everyone else out there, we hope you join us again for the next Top Innovator series. And until then, keep your brain cells active.